Okay, Paul, we are live. Welcome. And I'll start this by saying welcome to anybody who's watching this recorded. StreamYard reminded me to welcome them. My name is Stetson Blake, and today we are joined by Paul Kelly, who is head nerd at Enable. Paul, why don't you give everyone a little bit of an intro as to who you are and what you're up to at Enable?
Yeah, thanks, Stetson. So my name is Paul Kelly. I am a head nerd as here at Enable, as Stetson has said. This is my second appearance on with Stetson. So I was on last month as well. So he had me back. So thankfully, I didn't mess up the last time around. I'm based in Cork in Ireland. I'm actually the only head nerd at Enable that's located outside of the North America. My day-to-day focus is around kind of the End Central platform. That is where kind of I do most of my work in terms of webinars that I host, blogs that I write, working with partners that need assistance and stuff like that. And that then entails things like patching, security, automation. But like all the head nerds, that's when we kind of try and keep our fingers in all the pies and diversify as much as possible as well.
Yeah, love it. And of course, my name is Stetson. I founded This is an IT Support Group, our newsletter and wonderful Discord community. Today, we are going to be chatting about how PowerShell can enhance your RMM solution. I'll preface this by saying these conversations are pretty informal and they are interactive. So if you popped in early or during the call, like Lauren, not sure what that profile picture is, looks like a 10-year-old, something like that, or Donna Autry, go ahead, drop a comment, and we'll try to answer those questions as they come up. But otherwise, Paul, I think we get right into it. This title a little bit broad, lots to talk about, many different directions to go. But maybe we kick off by asking why even use PowerShell. I'm totally not reading from a canned question list here. Can't my RMM solution do it all already? So maybe you could kick us off a little bit and talk on that point there.
Yeah, I mean, so when we think about RMM solutions, they can do a huge amount for us. Whether that is the monitoring aspect of it, the remote control aspect of it, patching, deploying security products, whatever it may be. That's one of the core reasons why we utilize RMM solutions is to kind of have that functionality. But then we always want more, Stetson, and kind of what happens, particularly I suppose, if you're not new to an RMM solution, if you're using RMM solutions and maybe you're evaluating other RMM solutions, you'll always want a bit more and more and more. And there are limitations, I suppose, to what any solution can do, because this marketplace is so broad in terms of who wants what. So there's only so much that any tech company can build into a product, so it's available out of the box. What we'll often find is utilizing something like PowerShell or other scripting engines, but we're here today to talk about PowerShell, can really enhance what you can do as well. So, I mean, prior to joining the Head Nerds team here at Enable, I worked for about 7 years as a sales engineer, and I would do many as a demo, many as a trial evaluation, and you get questions asked occasionally, can your product do this and can your product do that? And you'd say yes, yes, yes. And every so often then you get a question where you'd have to say no, but I'd always follow it with a but. If you can do it through PowerShell, then you can do it through your RMM solution as well. So really, PowerShell is the key to expanding what you can do with any RMM solution to really fulfill the needs that you have out of your solutions as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I imagine I'm kind of curious if there's folks that are like building features with PowerShell that eventually get pulled into the main RMM solution.
I mean, it can happen, certainly. The different areas that you tend to see PowerShell utilize can be around things like expanded monitoring. The process we'd have here at Enable is if a partner builds some form of monitoring using PowerShell and they make it available to us, then we can share through the cookbook initially. But sometimes what will happen over time, new technologies come out, and if a partner's built something, we might work with that partner to fine tune that, or we might take it and with obviously the consent of the partner, look to incorporate into the solution as well. So certainly by building something, you're increasing the chances of obviously being put into the product for others to benefit from as well. But I suppose different RMM solutions have different ways of sharing what you build through PowerShell. So at Enable, we obviously have our automation cookbook. Other RMM solutions have other ways that you can kind of pull scripts into your RMM solutions and utilize that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Couple comments there. You mentioned the automation cookbook. I dropped a link in the comments there, and it's on screen as well. I'm just having a look right now. It looks like it says over 650 ready-to-use MSP automation scripts. Just scrolling through, it talks about things like the chocolatey package management, workstation daily maintenance, preventing updates if you need to, system reboots based on uptime, end user monitoring, all sorts of stuff here. And then I also wanted to highlight comment from Lauren, PowerShell, much greater than Web UI when it comes to managing 365 and Azure as an administrator. Kind of curious, Paul, for folks that maybe haven't implemented PowerShell into their workflow or their business today, like what does that learning curve look like? You have to be able to know how to code, or what's a good path to get started?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think a lot of people are put off using PowerShell because they'll see PowerShell script sets and they look at the length of it and they look at the code and you don't know where to start. And if you don't have experience or if you're not using anything on a day-to-day basis, it's very hard to just kind of pick it up and run with it as such. So back to my SE days, as I'd be demoing the product, I'd bring up a PowerShell prompt within the UI and I'd put in get-date and I'd kind of pass the joke that this is the sum total of my PowerShell knowledge. And I was joking, but at the same time, there probably was a half truth in it because, I hadn't really utilized PowerShell a lot. PowerShell was kind of, when I joined Enable, kind of PowerShell was kind of starting to get popular. But I wasn't using it on a day-to-day basis. I was using a bit around Exchange on-premise admin and stuff like that, but I wasn't doing any scripting with it as such. And then in my role, on the sales engineering team, I didn't have to do a lot of it either. So, it's not something that crossed my plate a lot. But when I joined the head nerd team, obviously it's something where I had to upskill. So I had to look and see, how can I learn this? And what I would always do, Stetson, is I'd start off with something like a simple challenge, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to, do this. I'm not going to try and re-engineer, the world, and it's going to create a little script that does this. And I would try to build out that script, and I would look for help and resources online through Microsoft, through blog posts. There's a whole host of resources available to you on the net where you can get help around scripts. More often than not, Stetson, actually, if you want something simple, you can actually find the scripts for you right there and then. And then you can kind of start to understand how a script puts together as such. So this is a great way of kind of learning how to use PowerShell. Start with something simple. Set yourself a goal of doing something simple. And before you ever consider even running it through an RMM solution, just get it to work on your test device through PowerShell itself. Whatever you're looking to do, if you're looking to monitor, if you're looking to automate, if you're looking to deploy, whatever it may be, change configuration, whatever it is, get it to work in your test lab, first of all, just through PowerShell, and then you can look to expand beyond that as well. But there's a huge amount of resources available where you can learn the fundamentals. And with anything, Stetson, the more you use something, the more you become familiar. So my kind of 5-6 line scripts now are up to 100, 200 line scripts, but I don't write them as 100, 200 line scripts. I write them as kind of 5 to 10 line scripts, and then you build and you build and you build to consider that they're like blocks in a wall. It gets higher and higher the more you build with it as well.
Yeah, I love that. Tons of great advice to unpack, and I follow this same. I think a little bit of what you're saying is kind of like get it working and then get it working better. build little MVPs or minimum viable products. Lauren commented Cursor, which is a VS Code fork that runs, it's like AI code editing. Hey, how do I do X with PowerShell and O365? Of course, Paul, I think that AI had to come up on this chat, and I think it came up on our last one. I'll definitely recommend any of these AI products. Cursor's great, Claude as well, Chat GPT. I think there's definitely ability to kind of move from coding to thinking in English. And if you can get a really good prompt, a lot of times you can get some great code or script if PowerShell is a scripting language. I'll add on to that for Lauren's comment. One thing that's been helpful for me is any kind of, again, scripting programming language. It's still helpful to understand it, and PowerShell is quite readable. Like it's English. If you can read English, you can read through a script. But one thing I like to do is, if you're using one of these AI solutions, be sure to check your own knowledge. So you can ask, like, if you get a bunch of code, you could ask something like, "Hey, can you please explain this line by line?" And don't use AI, but maybe don't rely on it all the time. Curious,
Yeah.
Paul. Yeah, do you see partners, customers using AI? How's that changing things from your end?
It's helped drastically when it comes to scripting, Stetson, because even if you go back to a simple script, create a script that does X, for example. If you put that into a generative AI solution, it can fire out an answer in a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, couple of seconds, excuse me. So even the process of having to write code anymore has gone from I probably don't need to actually know how to do this anymore. I just need to know how to construct it and obviously troubleshoot it. So you probably still need to kind of understand it. When you ask to use certain conditions, for example, the generative AI solution will be able to put that into the format that you need, but you still need to be able to read through your scripts or the scripts that it produces, and then understand it and be able to troubleshoot it. And when I mean troubleshoot it, I don't mean run the script, take the error code, feed that back into the generative AI, and then run the next version of the script that gets you. Because you'll find yourself going round and round the houses very quickly when you take that approach. When generative AI solution, whichever one it is, no free ads here, produces something. Always the first step is to read through it, and does this make sense, and does this actually tie in with the knowledge I already exist and what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to achieve as well. Because generative AI is very good, but it can from time to time just miss out on a tiny little nuance or a tiny little bit of information, and you can spend hours and hours and hours trying to work that out then, because it's missing a single word, or it's using a term that's slightly different than what the system you're querying is as well. So I'm all on board for generative AI. It's certainly helped with expanding my abilities in PowerShell, but you still have to have that human element, the human review factor, and that's where being able to just understand, as you say, read through the English of a PowerShell script is hugely beneficial, because you'll spot those little errors that it's made, you'll be able to rectify them, and then obviously you'll get your scripts working a lot faster as well.
Totally. Yeah, with great power comes great responsibility. You mentioned I've ran into some of those downsides too, where maybe the AI doesn't have either like context on a certain library, or it might be out of date, or that same thing where you've kind of gone around and around in circles. So it's you definitely have to be careful. Curious, Paul, should we go off script? Should we do a quick example of, like, in an AI tool? I have Claude up. Would that be all right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we could look to the audience, or we could come up with one together. I'm thinking we make a quick PowerShell script. Do you have an example?
I had a request recently, actually, by a partner who's always pinging me. For some reason, he's got a hold of me on Teams, even though it's supposed to be an internal. But anyway, but he wanted a PowerShell script to generate a random password which had 12 characters in it, and I was doing 101 things at the time, and anytime I get kind of, I suppose, a request from outside, I try and kind of deal with it as soon as possible, because if I kind of put it on the heap, it could get buried and stuff like that. So I opened up a generative AI solution. I asked exactly what you're asking here now. I click on run, and within seconds, it came back with the code that I needed. I obviously then tested it on my own environment to see if it would work. I then obviously put it into our scripting engine, which is Automation Manager and Central, and I ran it against my own device to see if it still works. I then tested it by uploading it to my RMM solution, ran it there, and then obviously I fired it over to the partner. So within probably 5 minutes, I was able to give him exactly what he wanted. Now, it's a very simple example, but it's a great way of just using the tools that are available to us now today to do these tasks, rather than, I mean, it's probably not the hardest thing to run, but if you don't know the commands, or if you don't know the format it should be put in, for example, then it becomes, it's a lot more research involved. And so I was here, as you can see, you have your answer, and I presume it's working for you, Stetson.
Yeah, you made again another great point. Like this thing can fire off, pretty simple examples. Again, we're not partial to any one solution. I like Claude personally. It gives us a pretty quick script, but I like what you said, Paul. Like trust but verify. Don't just throw it in and assume everything works. And then again, I have that. Please explain the code line by line. That's a favorite of mine. That kind of checks your own knowledge. Like, okay, these are variables, and this is kind of what's going on. I was gonna say maybe we could do like a follow up, like, can we modify the script to apply this to all users? Now, you don't want to do that, probably. Maybe you want it if it's not the same password. But there's probably lots you could do here, like change the password and then save to CSV, or change the password and then call some remote API.
And like when you think about kind of scripts, and I think there's comments of real world examples, like everyone has always has a different requirement. Like it's very rare that someone asks me the same question a couple of months in a row. You'll get a question maybe today that you had 6 months or a year ago, but you rarely get kind of the same question. So all people always have different requirements, different requests as such. So using generative AI is a great way of just getting that information quickly. If in 6 months' time someone asks us for this, we know we have it, and we can point them in the direction of the cookbook or whichever resources that we're sharing these scripts on. But other scenarios I've had recently, Stetson, where someone wanted to find what users were members of the local admin group. So again, you find, write a new script to find which users are members of a local admin group. Boom, you'll fire that out. And again, this is something that you could then start to expand on it. So you could, when you run this script, write the output to a registry key, and then the next time you run the script, compare the output this time to the information in the registry key to see has there been any changes, and if so, alert. So now you've gone from a scenario where you're finding which users are a member of a security group, to actually storing that information and then comparing that information the next time you run the script. And if that has changed, which you wouldn't expect it to do, for example, then you can trigger alert or notification. So now you've gone from doing a simple action to actually building yourself a little custom monitor that you can utilize within your RMM solution as well.
Yeah, I love that. We won't beat up AI too much here, but it just, again, want to make people aware, if they're not, like how good it can be, with the caveat, like check the output, be careful, make sure you're not being led in circles. Two things I wanted to highlight. One was the automation cookbook, which we mentioned earlier, has over 650 ready-to-use MSP automation scripts. Really, I think you could fall down a rabbit hole just looking through here. 875 total results. Probably finding lots of like Fortinet AP IDs.
And if you scroll back up there, Stetson, on the left hand under category, if you click on show more, should be a category there for PowerShell right down the bottom there. So there's actually 196, nearly 200 PowerShell related scripts here. So these are product agnostic. So if you're using other RMM solutions and not enable RMM solutions, these are all PS1 files. So now some of them obviously relate to enable products, as you can imagine, but in this particular script that we're looking at here, we're just getting the PowerShell version. So if you're using other solutions, you can come into the automation cookbook. It's available for everyone. It's not behind any paywalls or security walls in terms of getting access to this. You can come in, download the scripts that you need and utilize them within your own RMM solution as well.
Love it. And yeah, another thing, just another AI tip. I often paste scripts code I don't know how it works into back into Claude and say, hey, how does this work? It can definitely give a good analysis.
Yeah, and this is a great way, Stetson, of expanding your knowledge, because I find myself personally, you see all the lines of code and you see how they're formatted and stuff like that. But when you have something like generative AI actually spelling it out in plain English as to what this is doing, then you're actually learning. And the more you start working with generative AI solutions and PowerShell, the more you'll become familiar with PowerShell. So, I mean, if I look back a year ago and my knowledge to where I am today, it's night and day in terms of what I've learned, and a lot of that has been working with generative AI solutions to build what I'm looking for, but also understand what I'm building as well. I had a script recently working on a larger project around PowerShell and interacting actually with APIs. And there's about 150, 200 lines of script in the lines in the actual script, and it wasn't working. And I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. I was blaming kind of security within the customer's environment. And I said, look, it works on my device. It's working. These devices not working here as such. And there was one word on one line that was causing a problem. So I was at one stage, I was getting information, and then I was using a certain value to pull the unique information for that value, and I was using the device ID as opposed to the serial number, the device name as opposed to the serial number. So little did I know that the device name could actually be different to what I was querying it with, whereas the serial number was always the same. So by changing it from name to serial, everything started working again. So it just goes to show, there's no way, no matter how many times I passed that through generative AI, that I would ever spotted it. That was a kind of human error that I had to kind of read through. I had to understand. I troubleshooted, and I said, actually, this could be different if I think about it. I should use a different variable here, and then I changed it, and then it was like Christmas. All the lights came on, everything started working again.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah, I want to highlight a comment here from Ari. Is it possible to take the output from a PowerShell script and use it to populate a field in Insight?
So Ari, unfortunately, that functionality isn't available to you today within Insight. It is available to you if you use the N-Central platform. So it is something I've been pushing for, obviously in my kind of role as the head nerds and kind of the advocate for our partners to have added to the Insight platform. As part of our larger kind of ecoverse vision moving forward, we obviously want to enhance automation manager, what we can do, and hopefully the changes that evolve there will start to come into Insight over time. But yeah, you can do it in N-Central today, Ari, but you can't do it in Insight, unfortunately.
Great. Thanks for the question, Ari. One other thing I was just thinking of here. Earlier, Paul, you mentioned this, was it not the automation cookbook, but automation manager software. What is that all about? I think it's this page here, right?
Yeah. So I suppose what Automation Manager is in Enable is it's our GUI-based scripting engine. It's based on top of PowerShell, actually, Stetson, and it can be used to drag and drop predefined commandlets into scripts. So rather than having to know what the PowerShell code is, there's little commandlets. I think there's about 650 commandlets available for you. So you can say things like, is application installed? And then you can use conditionals. So if yes, output application is installed. If no, check to see if folder exists. If yes, download a file from here and run and install it. If no, create the folder, then download the file, then run and install it as such. So that, I suppose, before I kind of got into PowerShell, I was a dab hand with Automation Manager. The limitations with Automation Manager is that there isn't a commandlet for everything that you want to do. There's 650, but there's so much more you can do with PowerShell. It also has the get out of jail free card where you can actually use run PowerShell script. So when it comes to using PowerShell and Central, for example, which is kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I would always start out, first of all, by writing my code within PowerShell and ensuring that it works in PowerShell, first of all. And when I have that working, I can then open up Automation Manager and I can use run PowerShell script, and I can literally copy and paste my code into the run PowerShell script and put it in Automation Manager. Now, you might ask yourself, what's the benefit of running it in in Automation Manager if it's running already in PowerShell? But to Ari's point about outputting the information, if I run PowerShell script to Automation Manager in N-Central, I can actually write the output to custom properties, or if it produces output, I can also create custom services. So to go back to the project I'm working on at the moment around APIs, it's actually a request from a few partners that we had around FortiGate monitoring. They have switches, they have access points that they want to be able to monitor essentially from the FortiGate environment as such. You won't find any there yet. It's still in its infancy. It's not in the cookbook just yet. But
I saw one of these other ones, maybe SNMP checks or one of these integrations.
So there is actually a couple there. The list 40net switches and the list 40net APs. There are two that I created as part of this project. So what you do is you run these against your devices. First of all, it returns all the IDs of the devices that are managed within the environment, and then you can add each one as a line of monitoring to a device as such. The way this works is it's using the run PowerShell script to open up an API session to the FortiGate environment. It then takes the information, the inputs that you provide, it queries each one, and then it produces output in the form of the overall health of the device, the CPU usage, the names of the access points, what the state of the radios are, the overall health of the switch, whatever it may be. It's a huge amount. It's a big project, Stetson. It requires a lot of testing and stuff like that. But it's a great way of expanding an example of an expanding RMM solution. So, partners have come to us and said, I want to be able to monitor FortiGate environments. And, we can't do it out of the box, but now we can actually start building custom-based AMP monitoring that's totally powered by PowerShell to do that. And eventually, this will, hopefully be all available to download from the Automation Cookbook initially. And then if I can sweet talk to people in engineering and product enough, we might even get it productized eventually where they actually build it into the solution as well. But this is always the first step.
Beautiful.
Similar to what we had with Meraki monitoring that's now available in N-Central. That started off as a project by my boss, Mark Andre, to build that. Similar to the approach I'm taking at the moment, but now that's available within the solutions. Hopefully over time, we can add FortiGate to that as well.
Fantastic. I see you've been busy. A lot of these AMPs look like they're pretty recent here, September 24th or so.
Yeah.
I do want to get to a comment from Lauren. What are the benefits of Insight/Enable over other RMs like Datto or Ninja? I'm going to say Ninja. I work in an MSP. This is very useful. Thanks for this, guys.
So Lauren, how long do you have? Like it's this is almost an impossible
The
question.
list is long.
Yeah, the list is long. I mean, I suppose where N-central is particularly strong is and it's entire device management. So not just workstations on laptops, but its ability to do network devices, switches, routers, firewalls, SAN devices, NAS devices. So when we talk about supporting our customers, it's all well and good to have their workstation online or their laptop online. But if the network storage is down, or if there's an issue with the firewall, or if there's an issue with the switch, for example, you need to be on top of that, and you need to know about that. And that's one of the benefits of our solutions over a lot of the competitors in the marketplace as well. We also have the automation manager tool, which actually does make scripting a lot easier. So we're here today to talk about, PowerShell and the benefits of using PowerShell. But if you're not an expert in PowerShell, or if you've never used PowerShell before, having this automation manager tool that is PowerShell based, but with a GUI you can drag and drop, helps you understand the logic around PowerShell a lot quicker, and then you can obviously expand your knowledge that way as well. So it's probably one, Lauren, that we'd have to have a deeper conversation with separate to this. But if you want to know more, we'd be certainly happy to set you up with someone who can walk you through the benefits of using our solutions as well.
Awesome. Thanks for the comment, Lauren. And Paul, just for a quick plug, I think you are paul.kelly@enable.com. Is that right?
Paul.Kelly, N-able or N-, yeah, N-able. Yeah. So I worked for a company for years where we had a hyphen in our email address, and you'd say it's a hyphen, and they go, what? And you say it's the minus sign or a dash or whatever you want to call it. And they go, oh, right. And then we got away from it. And then when we were the orange color, we didn't have any hyphens. And then, a couple of years ago, we spun out again and we brought back the hyphen. So the bane of my life is back, the old hyphen. But these days, mostly I just type it out so people can see it, and they can copy and paste it as well.
Yeah, Lauren, I'm sure Paul would love to chat. And what's the classic quote? There's two hard things: cache invalidation, naming things, and off by one errors. So definitely maybe applies to domain naming as well. I wanted to get to a question here from Johan. How do you handle credentials needed for APIs like FortiGate?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we want to do when we're doing any form of scripting that involves credentials is ideally you want to use something like a JSON web token. So you want to limit the credentials to API only user accounts, so that you're not creating a username and password that can log into the UI of these interfaces as such. You can also, when you do something like FortiGate, you can actually restrict within FortiGate itself where you can access the API from. So if you have a JSON web token created, you can say, okay, you can have this token here, but only this particular device with this particular IP address is going to be able to utilize this as well. If you're using the JSON web token with something like N-central, for example, as I'm working on at the moment, what you can do in that situation also is you can take that JSON web token and you can store it as a password-based custom property. And then when you have your scripts built and run ready to go and you want to utilize them in N-central, you can actually pass that password into your script so that it's encrypted all the time and it's not visible to the end user or the technician that's running the scripts as well. So there's lots of things you can do when it comes to working with kind of credentials, particularly around APIs. What you want to avoid doing, Johan, is hard coding credentials into a script. It's fine for when you're testing initially. You might have a PowerShell script and you pop in the URL that you want to query, and you'll have your JSON web token that you want to query as such. But these need to be variables that you can obviously feed in as you run, because otherwise you're going to end up with loads of different scripts as well. It's not very secure, but also you can't be hard coding every script that you create with credentials as well. So utilizing a custom property and feeding them in is a great way of ensuring that you can generate or you can run the script, but you're not storing the credentials used to run the script as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And there are, of course, lots of thoughts around secrets management. I'll agree with that. That main point of not storing secrets within the
Yeah.
script. You mentioned custom property. Was that what it was?
Yeah, so the custom properties in Central allow you to store to store values, or they can be used by scripts to store the output as well. So I love custom properties. I think the first blog when I joined the Head Nerds was about custom properties. I think I've wrote 3 or 4 since. But you can do so much with custom properties. So if we go back to kind of thinking about how you can use PowerShell, you know, maybe there's a limitation with your RMM solution today. Maybe it doesn't give some piece of information that you want that you can get through PowerShell. So in Central, for example, it doesn't display the public IP address of a device. But you can easily create a PowerShell script that gets you the public IP address of the device. And if you set that to run as a recurring task, the output then can actually be pushed to a custom property, or it could be used as a monitoring service. So that information is always available to you. Another good use case, Stetson, is BitLocker encryption keys. Every device should be encrypted these days. The more layers of security we can put around the device and the data on the device, the harder it is for the bad actors to get that information from you. So turning on encryption shouldn't be seen as, oh, I don't want to do it because I have a lot of remote users, and what happens if someone is locked out, they can't call me anymore, they can't log on. That's not a good enough reason in this day and age to not turn on encryption. But how do you manage all these keys? So if you have a PowerShell script that pulls the encryption key, that can be written to a policy or a or custom property, excuse me, which is always available to you within your RMM solution then as well. On the other hand, then you also have the option of feeding in information. So, if you come to deploy software, for example, you might have a license key, and that license key might be different for customer to customer. I'm thinking of SentinelOne, for example, they use a site token. The script to deploy it is always the same, but the actual only variable is the site token. So if you have a customer value for each of your customers and you save those site tokens in a password field, they're encrypted, but you can then use that custom property to inject into your scripts, so as they can be used as both input and as output from your policies as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And maybe this is obvious to some people, but can we cover some of the like why around why we shouldn't hard code passwords and secrets?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're writing a script and you're hard coding a password and a secret into the script, then you are basically opening the door for like we talked about how these scripts are pretty much written in English as it is. If you store any form of credentials in any form of script at all, usually it's at the top of the script. The bad actor gets a hold of this script. They've compromised your device, they've compromised your RMM solution, whatever it is. You're basically, I suppose, like leaving your keys in your car and leaving the door unlocked. You're almost inviting someone to come in and taking it. You're making it easier for them. So security is paramount these days. That no matter how basic you think the Security Act is, it all helps. When you think about device data, the different layers that can actually be attacked along the way, from the internet to the network to the user that's using the device to the applications that are running on the device. They're all points of attack, and anytime you can or anything you would do to facilitate an attacker by leaving some information in plain sight that could potentially be exploited, it's just not a good idea as such. So always take the measures. It takes a bit longer, it takes a little bit more work, but it'll take you a lot less time to actually, time it would take to recover from a breach or a compromise, and have a lot less impact on your business should such a thing like that happen as well. So, yeah, fine when you're testing in your lab, but never think of publishing a script that has any form of credentials in it. Always use input parameters so that they can be defined, and ideally, when it's any form of sensitive information, encrypted input parameters like password keys, so that they can actually be visible as such as well.
Sure. Yeah, that was a bit of a leading question. I think it's obvious to most folks, but there's probably some benefits too that maybe folks hadn't thought of.
But
One,
sorry, Stetson, I have
yeah,
seen in the past how people actually create scripts and policies where they'll just use a text, they'll use an input field, but they'll use a text field. And then obviously, once they feed it in, it's not encrypted within the script, and it's visible then as such. So they think they're going about it. They're not storing credentials, but actually, if they're not inputting them in the right format, you may as well be storing the credentials in the policy anyway, because it's not going to, it's not going to have any effect.
yeah, or even if we think about like where your PowerShell script is running, if it's getting output to like loaded from somewhere secure, but then output to the log, that could be another place that the code's kind of duplicated. I have definitely committed passwords myself to source control, not on purpose, usually just because I'm kind of lazy and doing like a git add. But I'll add too, like just having one of those central solutions gives you a place that if you're following best practices, things like rotating security tokens on some sort of schedule, it's also just much easier. Like let's rotate it one place within the vault rather than everywhere it's running, the code itself, whatever it may be. I'm kind of curious about that, Paul. Where do you see customers or clients, let's say they've built up a kind of repository of PowerShell scripts. How are they managing, changing those and like sharing them with the team? What do you see as a best practice there?
I mean, like these days, kind of SharePoint is a great way of having a central repository. I'm still kind of old-fashioned in having just a folder structure where these scripts are. Particularly if you're working as a team, Stetson, you'll always have different levels of expertise within a team itself, and you or myself or someone else could be working, for a team for many's a year, but you're always getting new employees and new hires as well. So having a central location where, they can dip in, they can get access to these, they can learn, they can expand their knowledge, is a great way of sharing the knowledge. What a big mistake a lot of people do is they'll build something, but they keep it to themselves, and they kind of say, look, this is mine. I don't want to give it to anyone else. Yes, you make your life a bit easier, but ultimately your job should be, to make everyone's life easier within your team, especially. So any form of kind of central distribution, and obviously, you can do things like little quick emails. Guys, I created this little really cool policy the other day, maybe a screenshot of what it does, the output of it, for example. Knowledge share like that goes a long way, I think, to help expand what you do. And obviously, once one starts sharing, everyone starts sharing. Even have competitions. Best PowerShell scripts of the month or of the quarter or whatever. We all love to win things. So anytime you can kind of gamify this, it'll only benefit you in the long run as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think it depends a lot on kind of team expertise too. I think it's great to, start with, maybe one team member makes a share to keep PowerShell scripts, and then maybe it moves to SharePoint. And then later on, maybe the team moves to something like GitHub. I think can be a fantastic way to kind of track, revisions and just what's changed. I'm kind of curious as well, Paul. This is a little bit of again, off script, but I'm just looking. I saw that Enable actually has a GitHub repository. Do you know anything about that? And might there be some PowerShell scripts we could find here?
There's plenty of PowerShell scripts that you can find here as well. I try and focus around kind of our automation cookbook, because that is the one that the nerds control as such. But you know, as you can imagine, with an organization the size of Enable, we have so many different departments, and so many, you know, from the engineering team to the support team, they're always looking at ways of sharing the work that they've done with it, you know, as many people as possible as well. So this is another excellent resource. Like I tend to stuff, I suppose the nerd stuff we tend to kind of populate in the automation cookbook, but you'll find, you know, as resources from other people within the organization in this GitHub page as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that was, again, a little bit of a detour, but just something I was curious about. I do want to get to, I saw a question from EdNed here a little bit earlier. Hi, both. Can you share some real-world examples where you've seen PowerShell scripts significantly improve efficiency in RMM workflows?
So I suppose when I think of my own experience working for an MSP, Stetson, and you know, where I would have spent a lot of time was around backup management and notifications. So I have, I suppose in the past, I worked for a pretty large MSP, and with large MSPs, you have lots of customers. You often don't have a universal product across the entire estate, because you're acquiring new customers all the time, and they might have different products in place as well. So, if you have to check, different backups, for example, some might be using Cove, some might be using Veeam, some might be using Acronis, whatever it is, if you don't have a central way of monitoring all these, then you're very it's not productive to actually have to go and check different consoles or even check individual devices. So PowerShell is a great way. Most our backup solutions can be queried through PowerShell to find out if they've been successful or not, or information on it. So what I've seen a lot of partners do is they will use PowerShell to write the monitoring scripts that they want around whatever backup solutions, because there's so many different backup solutions they potentially can use. And then they can build that into their RMM solution, where they can maybe create a customized dashboard where they click on the dashboard and it shows them all the different backup products they have and the status of all the different backup products they have as well. PowerShell can also be used for application deployment. I think I actually have a PowerShell related PowerShell scenario from a few years ago, Stetson, where a customer of ours, they were an N-Central partner. They focused on one vertical. I won't give away too much information, but they focused on one vertical, and they had a large cohort of devices, about 5,000 devices, and they needed to. All these devices were getting a software application for a third-party application, kind of unrelated to N-Central. It was related to the vertical that they're in. And they kind of contacted us on kind of Thursday, say, look, this is happening on Saturday. It's going to be an upgrade. It's going to be rolled out, and it requires a minimum version of PowerShell version 3 to run. And it was going, how do we find out what's on each device? So we open up Automation Manager, we create a little PowerShell script to get the PowerShell version, and then we deployed it as a monitoring service across the entire estate. And we determined there was about 1,200 devices that were running PowerShell version 2. So would fail with the upgrade, and this would be detrimental to the businesses that they're supporting. So then we went back and we said, okay, so we now know which devices we need to target. Then we actually built a PowerShell script that actually downloaded and installed. I actually think we jumped ahead from PowerShell version 3 to PowerShell version 4. And obviously we tested it in PowerShell. First of all, it worked as required. We then uploaded it to Automation Manager. We tested it there on our test device, and it worked. And then we were able to deploy it to a selection of devices. And then we could see, because we already had the monitor in place to see what version was. They were failing if they were anything less than version 3. They all started going green. And then, on Thursday night, Friday morning, he pushed it out on a stage basis still, because he didn't want to overdo it, but he kind of scheduled it to deploy right across the night. And by the time Friday morning rolled around, all those devices had been upgraded to PowerShell version 4, so they're in place for the automations. That's a real thing that happened to me and I was involved with, but it's a great way of looking at a problem and seeing then how like there's no functionality within the RMM solution to update PowerShell or update whatever the application may be. But we looked at a problem, we looked at PowerShell solution, and then we implemented that. And so it was PowerShell fixing PowerShell, but it always kind of sticks in my mind as a way of, what could have potentially been a major issue for that customer being dealt with, like there's no way a human could update that many devices manually, but being able to do that in such a short period of time is a great kind of example of how powerful PowerShell can be.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd say, to expand on that a little bit, real world examples for any kind of automation for me has always been like situations where it's just unfeasible to do by hand or to click ops through, right? Let's say you have 500, 1,000, systems you need to modify or grab information from. The kind of lazy programmer approach, you're sitting there looking at your ticket and say like, well, there's no way in hell I'm going to spend a week, two, whatever, doing this by hand. So I guess it has to be scripted. Kind of acts as a forcing function. But even better is to build some of those PowerShell skills, like we talked about earlier, in advance, so you're ready when you need to automate something like that. So Edmed, thanks for the question there. What else? Johan mentioned a little bit earlier, leaking JOT or JWT tokens into logs is I guess this should be pretty serious issue these days. Yeah, would not recommend adding secrets to your logs. Not a good security practice. Paul, what else should we chat about? I know we talked about kind of why we should use PowerShell, some integrations with the enable suite, and I'm sure other RMMs you can add functionality. We talked about kind of that what do you want to call it, learning curve from 0 to PowerShell. Like, do you have to be able to code? Talked about some tips, of course, AI being a big one, but also the beautiful automation cookbook from Enable, and I'm sure there's many other resources online. And then I guess kind of testing out the code first and deploying. You mentioned on our notes here on a scaled basis. I guess that's what you were talking about in that short anecdote is maybe what we might call like a canary deploy.
Yeah, I mean, like, just because you have something and you feel, I've tested it in PowerShell, my lab device, I've tested it through my RMM solution, I'm ready to go. I mean, like, I would always be kind of, okay, it worked on one device. Will it work in 10 devices? Okay, it worked in 10 devices. Will it work in 50 devices? Then you can kind of ramp it up and you can get more confident with it as well. But the last thing you want to do is cause a monumental problem for yourself because, for whatever reason, it worked or appeared to work on your test device, and then you deploy it across 1,000 devices or 5,000 devices, and then you find that you've knocked every system offline, and then you're kind of pulling out your CV, maybe thinking of a career change, who knows. So always ramping it up. It's a lot easier to fix 10 problems than it is to fix 1,000 problems. So I would always take that cautious approach. It's always just the first time Stetson when you deploy it. Once you have it deployed, you can build it into your automation. So as new devices come into your solution, it can get that script. That's fine. But anything new, I would always kind of do in a scaled, phased basis, I suppose, might be the term I'd use to describe that as well. Also, Stetson, when it comes to things like PowerShell and doing anything with PowerShell, we talked about generative AI earlier, but simple Google searches or search engine searches for scripts is a great way to get started, because what you can do in that situation is, look, I want to do X. And, if it's specific to a product, so let's say you have a particular backup vendor, is there a PowerShell script that will monitor my X backup, for example? And if you go, if you find that you have a community site from that vendor or something like that, then you're seeing information. So you don't know where a generative AI is pulling the information. So if you can get the information, first of all, you can then take that information and then you can obviously, pass that into generative AI and say, look, I want you to modify this portion of it. I want you to modify that portion of it. So people are good with PowerShell probably. You don't necessarily have to know how to write a lot of things. You know how to get access to it, whether it's through scripts that are already available or through generative AI, and then how to work with it, modify it, and tailor it for what you want as well.
Yeah, I love that. It kind of fits into that quote of like defining the problem makes it half solved. I think that's definitely applicable here. Paul, anything else we should chat about PowerShell and RMM related before we sign off for the day?
I would just encourage people, if they're not using it already, to start to explore it, because it can really enhance what you can do. Every MSP out there that uses an RMM solution has different requirements. Just because your RMM solution doesn't do something out of the box doesn't mean that it can't be done. Just means you might have to do a little bit of work with it as such. And to go back to the point I made at the start, if you can do it with PowerShell, then you should be able to do it through your RMM solution by leveraging PowerShell and the scripting engines that are available in your RMM solutions as well. I know we certainly can do it at Enable, but I'm sure other vendors out there can do it also as well. But that would be my advice. There's loads of resources. There's online webinars. There's YouTube videos. We have our own Enable boot camps where we talk about using PowerShell and leveraging PowerShell. They're product agnostic. They're not, this is how you leverage PowerShell in Central, for example. This kind of just gives you the basics of using PowerShell, an introduction, if you will. So they're great resources to start expanding your knowledge. It's like anything, Stetson. The more you use it, the more familiar you become with it. The more you'll find yourself using it because you're more familiar with it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, I'll reiterate that Enable events are fantastic. I've attended a few on actually Intro to PowerShell, and they're totally free. You don't even have to be a Enable customer. And I'm just looking through one now that goes through setting up scripting environment, learning basic commands, writing your own scripts, leveraging modules, and understanding which PowerShell content you can leverage as an MSP. But Paul, we've covered a lot today. I really want to thank you for coming by today, dropping some knowledge on us and answering some viewer questions. If folks would like to learn more about Enable or perhaps reach out to you, where can they do so?
Yeah, so my virtual door is always open. So you're more than welcome to drop me an email, paul.kelly@n-enable.com. If you want to kind of just keep abreast of what I'm up to in terms of what blogs I'm writing, what boot camps or events I'm hosting, what community events I'm attending, it's at Head Nerd Paul is where you'll find me at LinkedIn, so you can connect with me there. And I post kind of daily as to what I'm up to in terms of events I might be attending or sessions, webinars I might be hosting as well. I also would like to point out, Stetson, that we've made it even easier now for anyone to access the Head Nerd content. So if you go to Enable YouTube channel, too many U's in there, but all Head Nerd blogs are now accessible directly on Enable U's YouTube channel as well. So we have an entire playlist of all the bootcamps, so you don't even have to sign in or register anymore. If you can't attend one on demand, you can click on the playlists there. And if you click on the playlist tab, actually, and you scroll down to the bottom, we have all the Head Nerd bootcamps. So you can see there's an absolute mountain of information here. This obviously focuses on some of our products. There's obviously product agnostic things like the intro to PowerShell in here. There's 15 things you can and should automate, for example. These are just examples that we talk about that maybe you're not doing today, but you are or should be looking to do through your RMM solution as well. We also have a ton of sales and marketing content with our sales and marketing nerd, Stephanie Hammond, who you know very well, Stetson. And that's, again, she keeps her content completely product agnostic. So if you just want to learn more about the business of selling and scaling your RMM solution or your MSP business, there's great content available with Stephanie in here as well. So this is an open resource for anyone that wants to access this as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I have something new to explore, and the content looks quite good. It's very technical and in-depth. This Mac scripting one looks super interesting, goes into using Brew and different things. There's, leveraging Insight RMM, 15 things to automate. And as you mentioned, business Q&A, average revenue, size, and contract money with Stephanie at All Topic Sales. Fantastic. If folks want to find that, it's Enable You on YouTube. Want to thank everybody for attending. And once again, Paul, thanks for dropping by. We'll hopefully chat again soon.
Thanks for having me again, Stetson, and we'll see you soon. Have a good one.
Bye.
Cheers.